Welcome to John Gets Games. Today I'll be doing a full 4-player playthrough of Stone Garden. This is a beautiful and somewhat hard to find Japanese import tile laying game where you are trying to build a stone garden. And in this garden you have a variety of tiles that show curved lines in the sand as well as chunks of moss. And this game has a resource called Virtue, which you can gain by giving your tiles to your opponents, but you can also spend that virtue to steal tiles back from other opponents as well as actually placing these beautiful stones down into your garden. I will teach the game while I'm playing it, so let's go ahead and jump in. Here's a starting setup for a 4-player game of Stone Garden. Each player is going to have one of these little garden boards in front of them, and we are all also dealt out one Master Gardener card, and don't worry, I'll tell you what all these do as we get to them in the game, and then a Famous Garden, which is a bit of a pattern that we're trying to make with these stones that we're going to be placing into our little boards. You can see all the stones over here in a little market, and finally a little track which shows the amount of virtue we have at this point. It's a currency that we use to build these stones into our gardens. We all start with 0, so let's go ahead and start the game. We're going to be the purple player, and let's jump into it. Each player's turn is split into 2 steps, and the first step involves drawing the top tile from the stack and then doing something with it. We can do 4 things potentially. The first thing is we could just place it into our board. The second thing is we could offer it to one of our opponents, or they could ask us and see if we could give it to them. If we do give it to them, then they could put it into one of their areas, and then we would get 2 virtue points for doing that. And virtue is good because it lets us get those stones down into our garden. The third thing we can do is we could just save this tile, putting it here on our board. You can only save 1 tile at a time, and then we could place this out on a future turn. And the final thing is we could just discard this tile if we don't want it, but that's going to cost us 1 virtue, and since we start the game at 0 virtue, we don't even have this as an option. So that's fine though. I think this is a good tile. We definitely want to place it into our area. And the first tile you put into your garden must go in the lower left or upper left location. And I think we definitely want to put this in the lower left location. Well, first of all, you can orient this as any way you want, as long as the long sides go along with the garden itself. So you can't place a tile like this. So I think what we're trying to do is, one of the things it scores is whirlpools, which involves making a circle of this sand pattern here. So if we put it up here, we would not be able to do that very well. We'll go ahead and start down here at the bottom of our board, and you put your Zen Monk onto the tile, the first tile that's placed on the board, but going forward you can always put new tiles that are orthogonally adjacent to the previous tiles on the board. That has nothing to do with the monk itself. For the second step of a turn, we again choose 1 out of 4 different options, but these are different. The first thing we could do is we could move our monk somewhere else onto our garden, but it has to be an orthogonal movement onto a tile that's already there, so it doesn't make sense for us to do that. In fact, we can't do that on the first turn of the game. The second option is we can build one of these stones into our garden. However, you're only allowed to do that once you have virtue equal to that spot on the board. So for 1 virtue, we could get one of these small stones here. For 3 virtue, we could get one of these reclining stones. But we're at 0 virtue, so that's not really something that we can do. The third option is we can play our Garden Master card. Now, what this says is we can instantly get 4 virtue, and we put that onto our track. But this is a one-time use card, and I think at this point in the game, that's not super important to us. So we're going to do the 4th possible option, which is very simple. It's just generate 1 virtue for yourself. That ends the second step of my turn, and that ends the turn in general. It's now the orange player's turn, and they reveal this tile here. They think about it for a little bit, and they decide they want to place this into their board, and you'll notice there's this green moss on the tile. Now you actually get 2 points at the end of the game for every tile in your garden that has moss on it, so this is a pretty good draw, and they decide they are going to orient it like this in the top left part of their board, and they'll go ahead and put their gardener down on top of it. For their step 2, they're going to just take 1 virtue as well. The black player draws this tile, and they're going to put that in the bottom left portion of their garden to start, and put their gardener on top of it. And for their step 2, they will also take a virtue. The blue player has drawn this tile, and, well, they're not super jazzed about it. It does have 2 quarter whirlpools, but if they're forced to put it into the top or bottom corner, it's going to really reduce the amount of options they have with it. So before they do something else, they ask anybody else if they're interested in taking this tile off their hands. And we tell blue that we are definitely interested in putting this tile out because we could put it like this, or we could put it like this. In both those cases, we would make a half whirlpool. And when you have a half whirlpool at the end of the game, you're going to score 1 point per tile in it. And this also makes it easier to make a full whirlpool. And with a full whirlpool, you get 2 points per tile. So potentially a whole bunch of points here. Also, nobody else knows this, but we're working towards this secret garden here, or this famous garden. It's a secret famous garden. And if you'll notice, there's a star on this location on the board. And what this means is, in order to get this 11 points, we just need to have any stone on this part here. And when you build a stone, you're able to put it down into any tile that's in the current column of the gardener. So I think going here makes sense, so we can potentially build the stone early and then maybe move the gardener on to try and build into the middle column here. So yeah, let's go ahead and take that from the blue player. And because they successfully transferred that tile to us, they're going to get 2 virtue for doing that. And when they get to their step 2, they're going to go ahead and take 1 more virtue. It's back to us, and we draw this really boring tile. If we look at this little cheat sheet down here, you'll see that there are 9 of these straight shot tiles in the game, so that's the most common one in the entire stack of tiles. Also, this is kind of nice to know what we're shooting for as far as trying to complete things. And while it would be really nice to keep working towards that whirlpool, if we got one of them, we'd be really committing ourselves, because we are allowed to put these tiles down in such a way that we kind of clash with some of the patterns on the board. You'll see that this little whirlpool hits these right here. This is a legal placement, but we're going to lose 2 points for every single juncture where there's a clash like this. So that's really not great. The other option we could do is we could put this down into our holding area and hope to get another one of these. In fact, you know what, I think that's what we'll do, because on a future turn when we reveal a tile, we can place this out and then put another one in holding, or we can just place both this and the one in our hand at that time. So let's hold on to this and see if maybe we can get a little more lucky and try to build this whirlpool out. And for our step 2, I think we'll just take a virtue because, well, we don't really want to move our Zen Gardener at this point, and getting virtue is usually a good thing. The orange player now reveals this tile, and they seem pretty darn happy about it. They're going to go ahead and place it right there onto their board. And for their step 2, they're actually going to build a stone into their garden. They can only pick from these right here because they had 1 virtue and that's all they could afford. But it's important to note that whenever you build a stone, you lose all of your virtue. So if they had been up here and they wanted to build one of these, they would still have lost all of that. And so, well, they were at 1. They decided they want to take this one. They think that one's kind of nice for them. As I said before, the stone can be built on any tile in the current column of the gardener, so they can place it right there, and that is going to end their turn. The black player reveals this tile, and they decide they want to save it for a future turn. And for their step 2, they'll just take a virtue. The blue player reveals this tile, and they've decided they want to actually get on the board. They're going to go ahead and place it. Actually, they are going to spin it around like that because it's, well, these moss tiles are rarer, so this way they only have 1 edge that's going to be kind of hard to match, and they'll go ahead and put their gardener down on top of that tile. For their second step, they're just going to take a virtue. It's back to us, and we reveal this tile. So it's good that it has moss on it because those are worth 2 points each. Unfortunately, we did not get any whirlpools. We didn't get lucky there. I think we might need to abandon the hope to make this a full whirlpool. In fact, this is kind of an interesting tile because if you look at our famous garden that we're trying to match here, you'll notice that in this spot in the middle and the bottom, there can be any different stone, and then in the middle spot, we want a reclining stone. But there's a really important restriction that I haven't told you about yet, and that's the fact that you can't put stones next to each other on tiles unless they're both within the same connected moss area. So I think it really makes sense for us to try and get this into this middle spot. So let's go ahead and play this reserve tile over here, and then put the one that we just drew right here so that hopefully we can get another moss tile at some point in the game, play it up here, and then get stones on both of those, because 11 points is a pretty real amount, and yeah, like I said, the only way to make that work is to get connected moss. For our step 2, I think that we want to build one of these rocks into our garden, so we're going to spend all of our virtue, like I said we have to, and since we're at the 2 location, we may as well grab one of those. We get to grab any we want, and I think this turquoise looking one is really pretty, so let's go ahead and take that. And due to our famous garden needing a stone on this spot, let's go ahead and put it right there. The orange player flips over this tile here, and they decide they're going to go ahead and slide it down right there on their board. And for the second step, they're just going to take a virtue. The black player now draws this tile, and they decide they're going to, it doesn't really matter, they're going to put it just like that into their garden. And then for their step 2 action, they're going to move their monk once over. The blue player now draws this tile, and they decide, well, they're just going to put it right down into their garden. And for their step 2, they're going to take 1 more virtue. It's important to know that if a player ever gets to 6 virtue, they can't get more, but when they spend that 6 virtue, they can take any stone and they can put it anywhere onto their player board. It does not matter where their monk is, although of course you still can't put 2 stones next to each other unless they're in the same moss area. It's back to us, and we reveal, well, this is unfortunate. Maybe we should have waited off on that tile, because this would fit here, but, well, you only get points for hemicircles. Having 3/4 of a circle does not actually benefit us, and in fact we lose 2 points for putting it right there. But we do have a pretty good option. We can slide this in here. We've now completed this half circle here, so we'll get another 2 points for that. And maybe we'll find another one of these swoops and put it over here to try and keep getting this 1 point per tile thing. But yeah, it's unfortunate we didn't draw that earlier to try and go for the complete whirlpool. And since we're working towards this famous garden that has a couple of stones in the middle column, we've got to get our monk over to the middle column so we can actually place those stones. So let's go ahead and spend our second step of our turn, moving the monk over once. The orange player draws this tile here, and well, they decide they probably want to put it in like this. Like, of course, they could do that to try and make a hemisphere, but odds are pretty good they're going to end up having a clashing edge, and you lose 2 points for a clashing edge and only 1 point per tile in a hemisphere. So they're going to play it safe, put it over there, and for their step 2 to their turn, they're going to move their pawn onto that tile. The black player draws this tile here, and they decide they're going to place it down here, although, let's see. I think aesthetically that looks a little bit nicer with the waves going like that. It makes no difference to the points, but you know, this game is about making a pretty looking garden. And for their step 2, they're going to purchase a stone. So they spend all of their 2 virtue, and they decide they're the black player, they may as well take this spiky black looking stone here. So they build the stone onto the spot, and as a bonus, whenever you build a stone onto the location where your monk is, you get an optional free movement with that monk, so they're going to take it and move the monk over to there. It's now the blue player's turn, and they reveal this tile. They decide they're going to put it right up along the top there. For their second step action, they too are going to build a stone. They are currently at 5 virtue, which means they could build any of the other types of stone, but they do intentionally want to build one of these 3 here, and these are called boats. They decide they like the aesthetics of this stone right here, so they're going to go ahead and put that into their garden. They too are putting the stone on the location of their monk, so they'll get the free move to move that monk up. A nice thing to note about the boat is you get a bonus 3 victory points at the end of the game as long as you have the boat on the bottom part of your board, which is one of the reasons the blue player did this. Another thing about the boat is there are only 3 of them in the game, and a player is never allowed to have 2 of them at once. It's our turn once again, and we reveal this tile here. Now, we could put it right there. Now, you'll notice that there is a clash, so that would lose me 2 victory points, which is not great, although this tile in and of itself is worth 2 victory points, which is a nice thing to keep in mind. Now there's another thing to keep in mind, and that is at the end of the game, we're going to score 1 point for every single non-moss tile in the largest rectangle that we can make in our board. So right now, if both of these had sand, for instance, then we could have a 2x3, and that would be worth 6 points. However, if I put this up here, then at the end of the game, the largest this could be would be a 4x4 of just sand tiles, so it really does hurt our overall scoring. So we want to think about that to the future. I think, I'm not sure if we actually want to place this tile down. We could put this tile into storage, but I think let's offer it to our opponents and see if any of them would like to take this tile from us because we would get 2 virtue for it. When we ask everybody, in fact, the orange player says, yeah, I would love to take that off our hands, so we say, sure. That works out for us, so the orange player takes this, and they're going to slide it in right there. Now you notice it is a bit offset, so that will cost orange 2 points at the end of the game, but these moss sections are connected, which is probably what the orange player was going for. Because we were so generous and helped orange out, we're now going to generate 2 virtue for ourselves. And for our step 2 action, let's go ahead and move here, so we're now in position to potentially build both of the stones that are the remaining 2 we need for our famous garden here. Now just hopefully we can find a tile that has moss along the long edge. The orange player now draws this tile, and they decide they're going to go ahead and put it right there along the top. It's nice and swoopy, but you'll notice that the edge still completely matches. And then for their step 2, they've decided they're going to build a stone. So they're going to go ahead and spend their 1 virtue, and now they're going to build another one of these first level stones. I think they've decided to take this one here. And they're going to go ahead and place it right here. They're allowed to do that because it's the same column as their monk, and they can put these 2 stones next to each other because they're in the same adjoined moss section. The black player has drawn this quarter of a large whirlpool, so they're going to go ahead and place it right over there onto their board. And for step 2, they're just going to take 1 virtue. The blue player has revealed this tile here, and they decided they want to slide it in right there along the top of their board. And for their step 2 action, they're going to move their pawn up to the top. It's our turn once again, and we flip over this tile, and this is, wow, this is really great for us. Actually, we can go ahead and put it right down there on our board. It matches, and it's a moss tile. It's now time for our step 2, and I think that we want to put a rock into our garden. Now, we got these 2 virtue by giving that tile away, so we may as well use it. We have to spend all of our virtue, but I think that we actually want to take one of these here instead of another one of these. We already have one of these on our board, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but at the end of the game, you get 2 points for every different size rock that you have in your area. So by taking one of these 1 value ones, we actually generate 2 victory points for ourselves. So we get to take one of this or this. I think let's take the more geometrical turquoise one to match the first stone that we took. So we'll go ahead and put this beautiful turquoise stone into our garden. You see they match just nicely. Also, if you look at our famous garden, that now matches 2 out of the 3 stones we really want to place down. We have an optional move with our monk, but I think we want to keep him in this spot so that hopefully when we put this tile down, we can then fill it in with the reclining stone, which is what our famous garden requires. It's now the orange player's turn, and they flip over this tile, which they are not too jazzed about. They don't really have a particularly good spot to put this on the board. And while they're thinking about it, we actually offer up to orange. We say, you know what, we would love to take that tile off your hands, and you can make 2 virtue. And the orange player says, you know what, that's fine. I wasn't really doing much with this tile. I guess we're kind of scratching each other's backs because I gave this tile to the orange player. So we're going to go ahead and take it, and it fits really nicely up there at the top. We made another half of a whirlpool, so that scores us another 2 points. So this brings the orange player up to 2 virtue. And then they're going to spend their step 2 moving their monk over to this middle spot. The black player now draws this tile, and they seem really quite happy about that. To be honest, they decide they're going to go ahead and, well, they're actually going to deploy their saved tile first, and they're going to put that right here on their board, and then they're going to put this new tile right on top of it. For the black player's second step, they're going to spend their 1 virtue, and they're going to go ahead and build this stone right here. They've decided it'll look really nice right there in their garden. It's now the blue player's turn, and they flip over this tile here, and let's see, how do they want to put it? They could put it like this, but they think that looks a little bit not great. It scores the same, but that's a little bit nicer looking thing for their garden. And they'll go ahead and take 1 virtue for their second step. It's back to us, and man, we're really hoping to draw a tile that'll fit right here with a moss so we can put 2 stones next to each other. And we get, oh, it's a swoopy thing. Well, this is pretty uninteresting as far as we're concerned. However, while we're thinking about it, the blue player says, you know what, I would love to take that tile off your hands, and you know, we don't have a good spot for it, and that would get us 2 virtue if we give it to the blue player, so that's good for us. We're currently at 0 virtue, and we're going to need some in order to build more stones, and specifically 1 right here if we can ever find the right tile for it. So we say, sure, we'll give this tile over to the blue player, and they put it right here. And the reason they're doing this is because, well, another scoring thing I haven't told you about. At the end of the game, each player will get a bonus of 5 victory points for every single row that they have that is symmetrical on the middle axis. And it's a mirror symmetry, so the reason they wanted this is because it's the mirror of this spot here. Now all the blue player needs is another one of these little island moss tiles in order to go right here in order to get 5 points bonus at the end of the game. So that generates us 2 virtue, and then for our second step, let's go ahead and take 1 more virtue. Now, if you look at the famous garden we're trying to work towards, this middle spot right here is the diamond, and that is a reclining stone. You'll see here that is this batch here on the number 3 spot. So we'd really love to fill in that tile on our board by the time it becomes our next turn so that we can purchase one of these and smack it down on our board. It's now the orange player's turn, and they reveal this tile, which they're not particularly interested in. They ask everybody else around the table. Nobody seems to be particularly interested in this tile. They decide, you know what, they're going to go ahead and put it right there, even though it doesn't really do a whole lot for them. It seems like they're pretty intent on putting that spot there. Maybe they're trying to get over to the right-hand side of the board. And in fact, that seems further evidenced by the fact that for their secondary step, they move their monk over onto this tile. It's now the black player's turn, and they reveal this tile here. They seem pretty darn happy about it. They go ahead and place it down here, and actually, while they're placing this tile down, we are telling them, you know, we are totally willing to take that tile from you in order for you to generate 2 virtue points. And the black player thinks about it, and they say, you know what, I think I'd rather just keep this tile. It matches up with my setting pretty well here. But unfortunately for the black player, I really want this tile, and there's actually something that I can do about it. I haven't shown this yet because it hasn't come up, but whenever a player wants to place a tile into their own area that another player wants, the other player can spend 2 virtue to steal that tile away from the person who's going to put this in. Now, up to this point, whenever anybody really liked the tile somebody else was placing, they didn't have enough virtue, but we have 3 virtue now, mostly because we gave our tiles away, so we were a bit nice, which gives us the leeway to be a bit mean. So we are actually going to steal this tile away from the black player because it is just perfect for us. We genuinely need to fill this spot here, and this also matches so we don't have any clashing going on. So we're going to take that, and as a penalty, we will lose 2 virtue, but that's okay. I think there's lots of ways to make virtue. Also, remember, we have this master gardener who we can use to generate 4 virtue at once. So I don't think we're too bugged about losing that virtue. And it's a bit unfortunate for the black player because, well, they could have just given that tile to us and generated 2 virtue, but I think they wanted to make us pay for it. So they now move on to the second step of their turn, and they're just going to make 1 virtue on the track. The blue player now draws this tile, and they decide they're going to go ahead and just put it right down there into their board, and for their secondary action, they're just going to take 1 virtue. It's our turn once again, and we reveal this really boring piece of sand. I think that what we probably want to do, we could put it here or here, but that would definitely restrict, well, if we went here, then we'd actually have a clash and that would cost us points. So I think let's go ahead and just store this tile for now and see if we can do something more interesting with another tile later and then just throw this into a less consequential spot. And we're going to go ahead and take one virtue as our secondary action. The orange player draws this tile here, and well, they don't seem too terribly interested in it. In fact, the black player asks if they could take it because it would match part of their board, but the orange player says no, they don't want to give it to the black player. They decide they're just going to slide it into their board here. Unfortunately for the black player, they can't steal it because the black player only has one virtue at this point. So the orange player is done placing, and then for their second step action, they're going to move their monk over into the corner. The black player reveals this tile here, and they decide they're going to plunk it right down there into their board, and they're going to take one virtue for their second step. The blue player now draws this tile here, and oh man, they are super happy. They got lucky because, well, this is exactly what they needed in order to go here in the corner. It matches the symmetry. Even though they're not identical looking, they're good enough as far as the game is concerned to get the player 5 more points. Plus, it is moss, so that's a 2-point tile in and of itself. Everybody else could potentially steal this, but nobody really wants to spend the virtue right now, so the blue player gets away with this one. And for blue's second step, they are going to put a stone into their garden. They're going to spend 2 virtue to do that, and they've decided they want to take this rock right here. They're going to install it right here, and they will also use the free move, since they built on the same spot as their monk, to put the monk right over there. Once again, it's our turn, so we draw the top tile, and oh man, that is perfect for us. This is awesome. We get to slide it right in there. We get another hemisphere. Man, we don't have any full whirlpools, but we got whirlpools, half whirlpools going like crazy around here. That's 1, 2 points, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points just in half whirlpools. I guess it is taking 5 tiles to do that. Normally a full whirlpool would be 8 points for only 4 tiles, but you know, I'm pretty darn happy with how that worked out. Plus, this is a 2x3 grid, so 6 points when it comes to just the basic sand tiles at the end of the game. So yeah, very great draw for me. The stone we really want to build costs 3 virtue, so let's go ahead and spend our second action going there. So next turn, we can build it. The orange player draws this tile here. That's pretty nice. It's got half moss, half not. They don't ask anybody else if they are interested in it. They really don't seem to want to be able to transfer this to anybody else, and I think that's because they're about to build a stone, so they're just going to store this and see if they'll have a better use for it later on, and then yes, for their second step, they're going to be building a stone on this spot right here. So they're going to spend their 2 virtue, and they've decided they want to build this stone into their garden. So that goes right here where their monk currently is, and they're going to take the free move action because it's on the same spot the monk was at. The black player draws this tile right here, and they decide they're going to go ahead and just put it into their garden just in that spot, and now they too are going to be building a stone. They're going to spend their 2 virtue and build this stone right here. And they're going to put it right here because it's in the same column as their monk, and these can be next to each other because they're on the same pile of moss. The blue player draws this tile here, which they're not too particularly interested in. Fortunately for them, however, the black player says that they would totally take it off their hands, so they go ahead and agree to that. The black player is going to put it right there, making a hemisphere for themselves, and this is going to get the blue player 2 virtue. So this brings the blue player up to 2, and for their second step, they're just going to move their monk over to this middle piece. It's back to us, and we drew this tile here, which is pretty not great for us. It doesn't really fit there or really anywhere at this point, and we have exactly 3 virtue, which is what we need to build the stone here, so we're not even incentivized to give this to anybody because we're about to be building a stone this turn. So, and you know what, nobody's really asking for it anyway, so let's go ahead and just put this one into storage and get this one out of storage and just put it onto the board. We got our hemisphere here, so it's okay to have the straight lines there. It kind of looks pretty great as well, and I think that's how we're going to do our first step. For our second step, we're going to spend our 3 virtue, and let's go ahead and build this rock right here. It kind of matches the turquoise theme we've got going on already. So let's put the stone right there, and now we have officially completed our famous garden pattern. That's going to be 11 points to us at the end of the game, which is pretty great. Also, you get a bonus of 3 victory points for each of these reclining stones that are in the central column on the board, so that's a bonus of 3 points. That just worked out really well for us all around. The orange player draws this tile here, and they decide they're going to go ahead and add it into their board, into their garden, just like that. And for their step 2, they have decided they are going to be evaluating their Master Gardener card. When you look at the English translation for the card, it says they can draw 2 tiles from the stack and place them in the garden in any order they want, and they can discard either of the tiles without a penalty if they want to as well. So here are the 2 tiles that they drew, and they decide they want to put this one into their garden just like that, and then they're going to put that one down there. The black player has drawn this tile here, and they are not too interested in it, and nobody else seems interested in it as well, so they decide to just punt and put it down into their storage for now. And for the second step, they're just going to move their monk over once. The blue player has drawn this tile, and they aren't too interested in it. However, the black player is, and they ask if they could take the tile off the blue player, and the blue player is just fine with that. So the black player takes this, they slide it in there, it makes a nice half of a whirlpool for them, and then the blue player gets 2 virtue. This brings the blue player up to 4 virtue, and for their second step, they are going to build a stone. And they have to use all of their virtue, but they've decided they actually want a reclining stone and not one of the tall stones. They're going to grab this one right here, and they decide to build it right here. And it's the same spot as their monk, so they get a free movement if they want, and they're going to go ahead and take it. The reason they took this reclining stone is because it's now in the middle row, so that's going to give them a bonus of 3 victory points. It's once again our turn, and we reveal this tile for the top of the stack. This doesn't really do much for us, but the blue player tells us that they would love to take it. It would complete a whirlpool for them, and considering we are at 0 virtue right now, that does give our opponent 4 points, but getting a jump on virtue is good, especially considering the game is starting to get a little bit tight, and having 2 points means we can potentially steal a tile from somebody else if the perfect one comes out. So we'll go ahead and give it to them, and they're going to place it right there, and we're going to take our 2 virtue for that. At this point, we can't build another stone in this spot here, so there's really no reason to have our monk in this row, so let's spend our second step moving the monk over here where we can potentially build something. Now, there are a couple other patterns that are going to give us victory points at the end of the game, and one of them is a knight move pattern. If you know anything about chess, that is essentially where you have a stone like right here, and another one over here in a 2x3 grid. The key is there can't be any other stones in that grid, so this will not count for us. However, what we might try to do for the rest of the game is get one stone up here and then another one down here. It doesn't matter what those stones are, but that would score us an additional 5 points at the end of the game. And if we were able to make this stone a boat, then that would be a bonus of 3 points because they want to be on the bottom. Our personality does let us get 4 virtue, so that will help us jump ahead and get the virtue we need for that 5-cost boat. So that's kind of my thinking for our next few turns. The orange player draws this tile. They flip it over and, well, it doesn't really do much for them. If they put it over here, they could potentially work towards a symmetry with this over here, and that's not the worst thing in the world, but what they were planning on doing was putting this tile down here, and there's only one more of these, and that would cause a break here, and if they got another one over there, there'd be another break, so that probably wouldn't be worth the 5-point bonus. I think what they decide they want to do, since nobody else is really biting, nobody else seems to want this, they're going to go ahead and build this tile into their area and then put this one into their reserve. And for the second step, they're just going to take 1 virtue. The black player draws this tile, which is another just super boring straight lines rake. Nobody else is interested in this tile, so they're going to want to put it somewhere. It's effectively the same as this for their purposes, but they figure, well, let's go ahead and put this one out here just because that looks a little bit prettier with this cool squiggly going on here. And for the second step, they'll just take a virtue. The blue player draws this tile here, and they are not particularly interested in it. In fact, nobody else around the table at this point is either, so they're just going to put it into their storage and hope to maybe get the other one so they can get a couple points for making a half whirlpool. And for the second step, they're just going to move their monk over once. It's our turn again, and we flip over another one of these straight boring tiles, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and put it down here so that when we build a stone here, which we can do because it's going to be connected to the same moss section as these other stones, we will get a free movement, it'll punt us over here, and then we'll be able to build over here to potentially try and do that knight move action. When we look at our step 2, we could just move to here, but then in order to get one of these boats built, we need to move 2 more times, it's just 2 more turns of movement. We could get lucky with donating a tile to somebody else, but I think at this point, what we want to do is use our special gardener card. Just taking my word for it, down here it says we get to gain 4 virtue, and that's going to give us 1 more than we need, but I think that's still fine. It means next turn we'll be able to place that boat down and really work towards getting our final rock down. And also, what this would mean is that would be our 4th type of stone down, and again, you get 2 points for each type of stone, and we'll try to gun to get one of these really big stones down for our final one so that we'll get the maximum 10 points for having all the different stone types down. So let's go ahead and take the 1, 2, 3, 4 virtue. The black player draws this tile here, and they decide that they're going to go ahead and put it right there. Now that does mean that they kind of have an error right here where these two edges clash, and that's going to cost them 2 victory points at the end of the game. And in fact, there is a bonus of 7 victory points for every player who is able to have no errors in their entire field. But the black player looks over here to these two moss chunks, and they figure it's really unlikely that they're going to have no errors. These moss tiles can be somewhat hard to match up and not clash with anybody else, so they're going to go ahead and do this. And for their second step to their turn, they are also going to evaluate their Master Gardener card. We can see here that this card lets them take a stone from the temple board and place it on any of the tiles in their garden. And they decide to build this very large standing stone rock right there in their garden. The blue player now draws this tile here, and they seem pretty happy with it. They decide to play the card they have, this tile they have in their reserve. They're going to put it right there, and then they're going to play this one there as well. That makes a half whirlpool for them, so that's 2 points right there, and they can hope to maybe match this little guy up at some point as well. It's our turn again, and we drew this tile here. Now, it's not particularly great for us like that. That would be bad on 2 different locations, but every moss tile is worth 2 victory points. So I think let's go ahead and place it right there. That way we don't have any clashing tiles whatsoever. We're in a bit of a bind. There's pretty much one tile that looks exactly like this that'll fit here so that we don't have any clashes. It'd be really great if we did that because we would have a shot at getting the 7-point bonus at the end of the game. But anyway, we're going to place this guy down here. And for our second step, let's go ahead and build a boat stone right where our monk is. This is going to cost us all of our virtue, and I think let's go ahead and go with this stone right here. That matches our turquoise theme a little bit better. So let's put the boat right there. Again, we can do that because we're in the right column, and these are adjacent in the same moss area. And we'll take the free monk movement to go over here to potentially work on that knight movement spot over there on our future turns. The orange player draws this tile here, and you know what? It is perfect for them. Not only is it perfect for them, it's perfect for us. Man, if only we had 2 virtue, but we just spent all 6 of our virtue, and we can't steal this away. This would have been the best one. But anyway, the orange player gets lucky. They get to plunk it down right there. This is a seamless curve right here. It's also an extra 2 points for them at the end of the game for the moss. And then orange takes 1 virtue for their second step. The black player now draws this tile here, and they decide they're just going to throw it up here into the top part of their board. And for their secondary action, they're just going to move their monk over once. The blue player draws this tile here. Oh, it's just straight lines. They're going to go ahead and put it right there. It doesn't really do anything in particular for them, but I don't know, it just looks kind of nice at that spot of the board. Also, you notice they're building a pretty nice area here of a rectangle with no moss, although this one here and this one here will maybe dictate how big that gets. If they put a no moss piece here, they'll lose a couple points, but they can potentially get a 9x9 grid to get 9 points at the end of the game, but we'll see how this shakes out. And the blue player just takes 1 virtue for their second step. It's once again our turn, and we reveal a pretty boring tile for us. Unfortunately, I think let's just go ahead and put it up here at the top of our board, and there's no reason to really pull this one out at this point. And for our secondary action, let's go ahead and take a virtue so that we can try to get 1 more stone built. The orange player draws this tile here, and as you can see, their board is almost full. The game will go into an endgame state once 1 player fills up their entire board, but we're going to keep going until everybody's board is complete. Now, the orange player is not too interested in this tile. They seem to want virtue more, so they talk to the blue player, and they ask him if they want this tile because it'll fit this little guy down here. And the blue player says, yep, that's totally fine. I would like to do that. So the blue player takes this tile, it goes down there, and then the orange player is going to get 2 virtue for doing that. And orange will take 1 more virtue as their second step to their turn. The black player draws this tile here, and that, you know, it's a bit of a risk, but they say, you know what, they've already broken their symmetry of their board. They're going to go here. It's going to cost them 2 points, and they're going to just hope upon hope they can pull the right tile to fit right in there for their board. And for their second step, they're going to spend 1 virtue to build the final small stone. And they'll put the rock right here and use the free movement with a monk to go over there. The blue player draws this tile here, and it is really not good for them. And in fact, it's not good for anybody at the moment. They decide to just put it into their reserve and hope for a better draw on the next turn. For their second step action, they're going to spend all their virtue, and they're going to go ahead and build this stone here. They're going to place it right here and get their free monk movement to put the monk right there. It's time for us to draw again, and we get this one right here. It, in and of itself, is a 1-point tile because it has a hemisphere on it, and nobody else is particularly interested in it, so let's go ahead and put it right there, and we'll see if we get lucky on our last draw of the game, most likely, to try and fill the spot in with the perfect piece, because right now, we have no errors on our entire board, except for maybe filling this in. It's a really low chance, but we'll see if we're able to pull it off. And for step 2, let's just grab a virtue. Orange draws this tile here, and it is great for them. Actually, they get to plunk it right down there, and it makes a hemisphere there, so that gave them 2 points and also means they didn't have a clashing bit of sand there. For step 2, Orange spends all of their virtue, and they are going to build the boat. And they'll place it right there. And now we have Black's final tile draw of the game, and they don't get it, unfortunately, but they do get to put that there. It looks kind of nice. There are no clashes there, but they will lose 2 points for this edge and this edge here. Now they move into the second part of their turn, and they're just going to take 1 virtue. At the end of the game, virtue is worth victory points at a 1-to-1 basis. The blue player draws this tile here, but it's important to know that we're now in an endgame mode of the game because one player, the black player, has finished their garden. The only real differences to gameplay is that in step 1, you're no longer allowed to rob a tile from anybody. You're also not allowed to transfer a tile to anybody. You can just place a tile or store it. It kind of speeds things along, I guess. And, well, the blue player, they're just going to put this right here. They can't give it to anybody, and this is worse because it makes more clashes. I believe technically this is not a clash right there. But our step 2 options haven't changed, so blue's just going to take 1 virtue. Now it's time for our final tile draw, and it looks like we almost got it. We will put this here because it's not going to create any errors on this edge, but this is going to be our 1 error for our whole board. Unfortunately, it's going to cost us 2 points, and then another 7 points because you get the 7-point bonus if there are no clashes on the board. But, we did the best we could, so that is our tile placement. Since it looks like this is going to be our last turn of the game, let's go ahead and spend our 2 virtue in order to place this stone down. And we'll place it here, so that's going to give us our knight shape, which is an extra 5 points at the end of the game. And here's Orange's last tile, and that's pretty darn good. They have no problem with that. They'll slide it in there. It's an extra 2 points for the moss. Unfortunately for them, they also have 1 error on their entire board, so they too will not get that perfect board 7-point bonus. The black player's garden is complete, so they skip step 1. And for step 2, they'll just take a virtue. So we finally come to blue with the last tile draw and last turn of the game, and they got, well, that's pretty good. It's a moss tile. It does mean they also have a single error without getting this whole board done. It's obvious that having large chunks of moss makes it much more difficult to get that 7-point bonus on your board, so they're going to go ahead and do that. And for their step 2, they'll take 1 virtue, and with that, the game is now over. Let's count up the points. First things first, we're going to take all of these monks off the board, and these are going to be used as scoring pawns on the scoring track over here. It starts at 0 off to the left-hand side of the screen, but believe me, I'll be making it along this side of the track pretty soon. There are 9 different steps to the scoring, so we're going to go through them one by one for all the players. Scoring step 1 gives players points for their largest sand-only rectangle on their board. So as the purple player, we have a 2x3, so we'll get 6 points. The orange player over here, they also have a 2x3 for their largest rectangle, so 6 points for them. The black player was only able to, let's see here, yeah, they were only able to get a 2x2, so they get 4 points. And then the blue player was able, wow, they got a 4, actually, I take it back, there's a little bit of moss there, so they also had a 2x3 for 6 points. Scoring phase 2 gives each player 2 points for each moss tile in their area. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moss tiles for 10 points. The orange player over here was able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so they're going to get 14 points total. The black player has 1, 2, 3, 4, so they're only going to get 8 points for the moss tiles. And then finally over here with the blue player, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 for 8 points. Step 3 awards every player 5 points for each symmetrical row that they have, but the only player who was able to pull it off was the blue player with this row right here, so blue gets 5 points. Step 4 gives points for whirlpools, and again, you get 1 point for each tile in a half whirlpool and 2 points for each tile in a full whirlpool. So let's start with us. We have got a half one here, so that's 1, 2, and then 3, 4 for this little guy, 5, 6 for this one, and 7, 8 total for us. Oh, and we actually get 9 over here because this is also a half. Orange was only able to pull off 1 semicircle, so they get 1, 2 points over there. Black managed to get 2 semicircles, so they get 2 points over here. They don't get to do this half over here. This all told is only 2 points, and then they also get 2 points over here, so 4 points total. And now blue is able to pull off 2 semicircles and 1 complete one. So this right here is going to be 2 4 points, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 points for blue. Step 5 is the evaluation of the sand pattern. This is where we all lose 2 points for every one of our clashing infractions. So we lose 2 points for the spot right here. The orange player only has 1 as well, so they lose 2 points. The black player has 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's going to be 8 points that they lose, unfortunately. And then over here for the blue player, they're just going to lose 2 points. This is also the point where anybody who had a perfect garden would get 7 points, but none of us was able to pull that off. Step 6 is basic stone points. This is the part where we get 2 points per type of stone that is in our garden. We were able to get 4 out of the 5 different types. The orange player over here, well, they were only able to get 3 of the different types in their garden. And both black and blue were also only able to get 3 different types of stones in their gardens. So that means we get 8 points and everybody else gets 6. We've now reached step 7, which in and of itself has 6 different steps in it. The first step is scoring the knight pattern. So again, that is when you have 2 stones in a 2x3 grid with no other stones in between, and you get 5 points. We were able to pull that off here. The orange player was also able to pull that off, as was the black player down here, but unfortunately, blue was not able to. So everybody but blue gets 5 points. Next up, we have a pattern that I never actually discussed during the gameplay because nobody was able to actually pull it off, and that's a diagonal pattern. So that would be if we had been able to do this with a diagonal of stones and no other stones in any of the spots, then that would be worth 7 points. However, nobody was able to pull that off, so we can skip it. This brings us to the second scoring pattern that I never talked about because, again, nobody was ever really in a position to pull it off, and that is the horizon mountains. That would be if anybody was able to get 2 of these really large stones next to each other on the top row, but only one person built one of these tall ones anyway, so nobody gets this bonus. And now we have the third and final pattern, which I didn't actually tell you about while we were playing. That is the 3 honorable stones. That is if a player was able to get a small, a large, and then a small on the top row of their board. Unfortunately, nobody was able to pull that one off, so nobody scores that one either. We now move to the reclined stone bonus, and this is 3 points for every single reclined stone in the center column of a board. So we get 3 points, as does the blue player over here, but nobody else was able to pull that off. And the final stone scoring step is 3 points for each boat that is on the bottom row, so that is going to be everybody except for black. Step 8 is where we score our famous gardens. We know that we were able to pull it off because we were watching it throughout the game. We have any stone here and any stone there, and then finally we needed a reclining stone in that specific spot, so we get 11 points. Orange was also able to pull this off because they could have any stone here, then they had to have a reclining stone here, a small stone over there, so they're going to get 11 points as well. Black has a much harder one that's worth more points, and they were also able to pull this off. They could have any stone here, then they needed 2 of the reclining stones there, and then a small stone right there, so that's going to get them 15 points. And finally, we have blue, who is also able to make this work, so yay, we were all able to pull off our famous gardens. They've got 2 of these small stones in the corners, and then they could have any stone in this spot here, so they get 10 points. And finally, we have step 9, where each player gets points equal to their current virtue. So we get 0 points, orange gets 1, blue gets 2 points, as does black, and this is our final score of the game. We were able to pull off a win with 53 points, then blue has 48, orange has 46, and black brings up the rear with only 37. But before we end it, let's take a brief look at each of our gardens as they stand at the end of the game. I hope you enjoyed this playthrough, not only seeing how the different mechanics work together for players to build these gardens, but also to see how beautiful the different gardens could end up at the end of the game. It's obvious that there are a bunch of things that players need to focus on while they're playing this game. You have this famous garden that you can try to match as a pattern on your board, but those usually give you between 10 and 15 points, and you can get that amount of points for other patterns that everybody can try to get as you're playing the game. I'd also like to note that I never once had any player discard a tile at the beginning of their turn. It costs a virtue to do this, but as you can see, you can get virtue somewhat easily by giving your tile away to an opponent, which sometimes is easy to do, and I guess other times isn't if you draw a relatively boring tile. But I think it's more likely that some of the players would have had, well, no errors potentially in their entire garden if they had chosen to discard a tile or two in order to see a couple more tiles and try to get the right one that's going to fit right in there. Getting that bonus of 7 points, well, it's more like a bonus of 9 points when you think about it, because you lose 2 points if you only have 1 infraction, and then you would have gotten 7. So that's a very big amount of points that I didn't really utilize while I was playing this one particular play of the game. But I think in general, this was a pretty good example of how the game plays. In the previous 4-player game I played with other people, there were a couple more steals than happened in this particular game. It's more of a threat, I guess, in general. It's not something that's going to happen all the time, although it did only happen once in this particular playthrough. I just really wanted you guys to be able to see that particular action because it is a somewhat important part to the game as it's played. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I think this is a beautiful game. It's somewhat hard to get. Also, I noticed after I bought this game, it took 3 months for it to arrive after I purchased it for about $110. About a month ago, they announced that there is now an English version of this game. And the game is mostly language independent, but the cards in particular have English on them, even though it's pretty easy to just look up at the back of the rules to see what your specific person does while you're playing the game. So that's a thing for everybody to know, really. They just obviously made a bunch of new copies of the game. They are in English. They're still around $100, so it's still not the cheapest game ever to acquire and put it in your collection, but I think it's a very interesting, neat-looking game. It's a bit of a collector's item, to be honest, with the gorgeous pieces and everything. Just a very cool package. Yeah, you just have to spend a good chunk of money to get it. So that definitely wraps up this video. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who is supporting this channel through Patreon, including the producer level pledges. If you too would like to directly support this channel, you can do so at patreon.com/JohnGetsGames, and I really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to see more full game playthroughs like this one, as well as in-depth board game reviews and vlogs, you can do so by subscribing to this channel. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.